What's going on, guys? Are you interested in getting best in slot range gear, but you don't really want to take the plunge on dropping like 11 bill in case you don't actually like range? Well, in this video, I'm going to be going over the topic of, is it worth it for an average player to be getting best in slot range gear? I'm going to be talking about a few different topics in this video about range. Those are going to be the ease of use, the damage output, the cost to gear, and then kind of some miscellaneous little like utility things with range. And hopefully this video helps some people decide if they want to or don't want to get best in slot range gear, because you work hard for your GP and you definitely don't want to waste like 10 bill plus on a combat style you're not really going to use. Alright guys, so before I get any deeper into this video, I'm just going to discuss what the absolute minimum you could get away with for best in slot range gear is going to be. So you can see I'm here in the Clan Wars portal, just so I could see my own gear. But these are the absolute minimum things that you're going to need for best in slot range. To start out, you're obviously going to need a Bow of the Last Guardian. This is just, an incredibly strong weapon. It's ridiculously good. You are also going to need Elite Dracolich. You might be able to get away with the non-elite set, but the elite set is significantly better. So I would class that as being part of the best in slot kit, and you definitely are going to want to have all 5 pieces just to get that increased duration of the effect. You are also going to need a Grimoire. Range basically doesn't function without like the incendiary or even like a tsunami buff from an off-style crit buff, but yeah, range doesn't really function without the critical strike buff, so you're definitely going to want to be increasing your crit chance as much as possible. You are also probably going to need a Zuck Cape. I mean, if you can get this gear, you can definitely get a Zuck Cape. But the range Zuck Cape isn't really that great. It just gives you a boosted dead shot, which is alright, but it's not like the best thing in the world. You are also going to need to have the Stalker's Ring here. You could use a Reaver's Ring, but I would highly suggest getting the Stalker's Ring with the effect. And the reason for that is because we use full arrows mostly. And full arrows lower your accuracy, and you definitely don't want to be stacking those accuracy debuffs and getting below 100%. The other things you are definitely going to want are going to be Pernix Quivers. You probably are going to want 2 of these, but you may be able to get away with 1 of them if you want, and you're like good about switching with the ability thing. I personally find it easier to switch the quivers themselves than using the button to switch the ammo types in the quivers. I basically use the quiver like you see here, where I have a bolt and an arrow, so if I do put on dual wields, I can start shooting them without having to switch a quiver as well. But it's really up to you how you use these, but you're probably going to want to have 2 of them. And then I also have this extra Tyrant Wind quiver here with my Death Spore arrows, just because it looks different. I always know which one is the Death Spore one. And then the final thing, well, you're also going to need Greater Ricochet with Roaming 4. That's pretty self-explanatory, just to build a ton of stacks. And then the final things you're going to need are going to be the EOFs. So as you can see here, this is an Eldritch Crossbow EOF. I had this ever since Raksha came out, and it is absolutely worth putting the Eldritch Crossbow into the EOF. You basically can't use the Bow of the Last Guardian with an Eldritch effect unless it's in the EOF, because if you switch weapons, it takes away the EOF effect, or I mean the Eldritch Crossbow effect. So if you put it into an EOF, you can get that split soul effect while using the Bow of the Last Guardian, which is obviously ridiculously strong. Also, you're going to want a Saren Godbow EOF. This is basically just to continue stacking up stacks on the Bow of the Last Guardian without having to lose out on your stacks by switching to a Saren Godbow itself. It's an expensive item to put into an EOF, just like it is with the Eldritch, but definitely really, really powerful with range gear. And then the final EOF you're gonna want is going to be the Dark Bow EOF. This is ridiculously strong, especially with the rapid fire effect on the Dracolich armor. You're basically able to full channel your rapid fire and then just spam 2 dark bows and then Greater Ricochet and then shoot another dark bow, and you can just pump out an absurd amount of damage with the dark bow EOF. So this is definitely another EOF that I think is absolutely required. Obviously, there's a bunch of other stuff that exists for range that you could get, but this is the bare minimum that I would say you need. So a little side note here, if you go over into your keepsake box and you go all the way to the back where your keepsakes are, an item that is really, really good to keepsake for range is going to be the bone blowpipe. And basically the reason that you see people using the blowpipe here over the actual bow itself is because the blowpipe hits one tick earlier for certain abilities, which doesn't really seem like it's that important, but for things like the Eldritch crossbow and stuff like that, it is incredibly strong to be getting your damage out one tick earlier. It makes it easier to prayer flick and stuff like that. And I would highly suggest buying and overriding a bone blowpipe if you don't have one. It does help quite a bit for range. Alright guys, so now in the background you're going to be seeing I did a bunch of Raksha, Zamrock, or Zamrock 500% I should say, and a little bit of Solak with the Bow of the Last Guardian. Those are the main things that I did. I did kind of play around with some other stuff, but I didn't really record that or whatever. But yeah, those are probably the main things that I did that I am kind of basing my opinions off of. If you do other content, you know, the bow may or may not be good there, so kind of up to you. So let's get right into if range is worth it for you guys. So the first category I'm going to be starting with is going to be the ease of use of this combat style. So range is unfortunately incredibly difficult to use, at least use optimally. You might be able to get some easy methods going. I didn't really test any like Revo bars or anything low effort like that, but definitely to get the best output from range, you have to be putting in a lot of effort. If you're looking at some of the footage in the background, there is a ton of moving parts going on here with range. Like I'm constantly switching EOFs, constantly switching ammo types, manually casting all of my abilities. Obviously, I didn't try Revolution here, but yeah, I'm like constantly using weapon special attacks and EOF special attacks and like using all of this different stuff. And it is pretty click intensive to do this. So if you're the type of player that doesn't like to super try hard all the time, range probably isn't for you. This is definitely the sweatiest combat style in the game, I would say. And yeah, I don't even know if the damage output it does is really worth that amount of effort, to be honest with you, especially with how easy necromancy is to use, because at the end of the day, I don't really think the damage output from range is really that good compared to necromancy unless you're doing something absolutely like crazy. It's probably, in my opinion, better to just use necromancy, but it is kind of fun to play around with range. So the second category I'm going to be talking about here is going to be the damage output of best in slot range gear. And the damage output from best in slot range gear is incredible, especially the burst damage you're able to do. If you're watching the Zamrock kills in the background, you can see I am like nuking these 500% and not even getting any mechanics. You're able to just pump out an absurd amount of damage in a few game ticks with range. Between the Saren Godbow special attack and dark bows, you're just able to just nuke everything. And yeah, the damage output from range is pretty ridiculous. As far as the sustained damage is concerned, range has pretty decent sustained damage, but you have to be putting in a lot of effort, I've found, to be getting like optimal sustained damage. I think necromancy is it has probably better sustained damage unless you're like the sweatiest player of all time. So again, much like the ease of use thing, I think personally necromancy is a better choice for the majority of people because the damage outputs are probably pretty similar between these two combat styles. However, necromancy takes about, you know, I would say about 1/100th or so of the effort compared to range. So, you know, but I will also say that if you're really, really good and you want to put in a lot of effort, you can pump out absurd burst and sustain damage with range gear. You can also pump out a ton of damage with poison at places like the Archblade or with BiC arrows. So the damage output of best in slot range is actually pretty high. So now I'm going to be talking about the cost of this gear, and this is probably going to be the most prohibitive part about this gear. So to start things off, you're going to need a Bow of the Last Guardian, and this costs about 3 billion GP, I think. So that is a pretty expensive item, you know. You're also going to need the Elite Dracolich armor, which I have calculated based on the LE-bot thing on Discord to come out to about 2.7 billion GP. That armor seems to be incredibly expensive. I don't really know how accurate that is though, but currently I think it costs about 2.7 bill for that. You're also going to need 3 Essences of Finality. This, I guess, costs somewhere around 800 to 830 million GP. You are also going to need a Saren Godbow, which costs about 1.25-ish billion GP. The Eldritch Crossbow costs about 750 mil. The Grimoire is about 220 mil. The Stalker's Ring and the enchantment is about 180 mil. 2 Pernix Quivers is going to run about 70 mil. Those are pretty cheap. Greater Ricochet, it looks like it's about 800 mil, and then Greater Death Swiftness is about 250 mil, making the grand total of best in slot range gear come out to about 10 billion GP total. So if you have 10 billion GP and you're wondering if you want to buy this gear, hopefully this video will either save you 10 bill or make somebody else 10 bill richer, I guess. But yeah, this gear is really, really expensive. Obviously, 10 bill is kind of ridiculous. For most people, I think this is far too expensive for the reward you're going to be getting for using range. Like I said, Necromancy is, what, about 1 to 1.5 bill. It's like almost a tenth of the price for pretty similar results. So yeah, definitely pretty expensive. And also another thing a lot of people might not remember is it costs a lot to use the arrows for range. Each different arrow type is pretty expensive as well, and you use quite a bit of them per hour, so the cost to use range is also pretty high. Your death costs are also pretty high, so unless you never die anywhere, you're probably going to be spending about $1 to $1.5 million every time you die, which compared to what deaths used to be is like nothing, but pretty expensive still nowadays with the updated death system. So yeah, if you have 10 bill laying around doing nothing, you could buy some range gear and have a good time with it. But other than that, definitely pretty expensive stuff. So now I'm going to be talking a little bit about kind of the miscellaneous things about range that I didn't really think fit into the other categories. It's kind of just going to be like my opinions, really. So to start things off, I personally really like how far away you can attack the target from with range. The Bow of the Last Guardian has a 9-tile attack range, and this makes it so you can pretty much deal with almost any sort of area-based mechanic while still like attacking the target, which is really, really nice. Necromancy kind of has an issue with this, and Melee especially has an issue with this, where you have a really short attack range, and it can be kind of annoying to deal with that. And yeah, range definitely doesn't have that problem. At places like Solak, you could even reach the eruption pillar thingies while being in the circle from the elf. So you could like completely deal with that mechanic very easily to get rid of the extra eruption while still like perfectly being in the little green circle or whatever you call it. And that was really nice to be able to do that. And I definitely like how far away you can attack from with range. Another really cool thing about range is it's got a lot of options with the arrows. Honestly, I think the bolts are designed a little bit better than the arrows because the bolts do a ton of different stuff like adrenaline, damage, healing, all that. And the arrows, they're effectively just damage, but it is pretty cool to have like a poison arrow, a damage arrow, a extreme damage arrow against dragons, and the Wen arrows, which you could like micromanage if you want. So it is pretty cool to have like all these different arrows you could use. But like I said, I definitely did like how the bolts are designed, but I guess there's always room for more arrows in the future. Although it does seem like they used the armor to be the adrenaline thing instead of arrows, so they probably aren't going to do that because that'd be just kind of ridiculous if you had even more adrenaline. One of the things that I don't really like about range, though, is its reliance on crit buffs. This, for one, makes you use the Grimoire, which is 6 mil an hour to use, which is pretty expensive, but the main reason why I don't like that is because it seems like it forces you to precast a bunch of stuff on a dummy before the kill starts. I don't know if you've noticed me doing that in everything except for Zamorak. I precast all this stuff on a dummy just because it takes so long to cast all that garbage that it like ruins your kill basically if you try to do it all on the actual target. So it does seem kind of annoying that the crit buffs like force you to use them on the actual like dummy, not the boss itself. And a big part of that is because you have to like stack up 5 stacks with the death spore arrows and stuff like that. So yeah, I'm not a huge fan of that. If you noticed in the Raksha kill, I was like even switching to Tsunami and stuff so I could have 2 different crit buffs. It's just, you know, it's just kind of annoying to have to fully rely on the crit buffs that much in order to make the combat style like function at all, because without the crit buffs, you're basically just standing there. So yeah, I wasn't a huge fan of the crit buffs, at least, you know, to that extent. Same thing that kind of goes with it is, like I said, having to precast all the stuff on a dummy, it just kind of wastes a lot of time before a kill starts, where you're like standing there taking 30 seconds and then getting like a 2-minute kill or something. So it's just like a significant amount of time precasting, and it seems like you're almost forced to do something like that unless you want to get like a really slow kill. So yeah, those 2 things I definitely feel like are a little iffy with range. So there are 2 more things that I kind of want to talk about with range here. And the first is going to be the lack of utility. Range doesn't really have any sort of debuffs besides Blackstone arrows, and it doesn't have any sort of passive healing that you're able to use, at least. And yeah, it just seems like there's not really a whole lot of utility that range has. It's pretty much only damage. Whereas like Necromancy, you notice the ghost like passively heals you and stuff like that. And then the final thing is, this could always be added in the future, but currently there is no tank gear or anything for range. You know, obviously melee doesn't have this either, but there is no usable tank gear with range. I guess you have Octo Tempest, but yeah, there's just like no tank gear. There's no of those aspect of evasions and stuff like that. And that paired with the lack of utility, I feel like it makes range feel kind of like missing something for certain types of players, where it's like only catered to one group of people, which I guess is not the worst thing in the world, but it would be nice if more people were able to use range, at least in my opinion. But that's not really that big of a deal, I guess, at the end of the day. Alright guys, so now I'm going to give my overall conclusions for this video. The basic summary of this video is, if you like to put in a lot of effort to do a ton of damage, range is really, really good for you. The skill expression for range is incredibly high, and if you're able to do a lot of, you know, manual clicking and abilities and keybinds and all that stuff, you're gonna get a lot out of best in slot range gear, and your damage output is going to be incredible. However, if you're more of a Revo type player who doesn't really like to put a ton of effort into combat, range is absolutely not for you. You are probably not gonna get that great of results, especially compared to something like Necromancy. You know, you're just gonna have a way better time using Necromancy. If you're a Revo player especially, I didn't really test a whole lot of Revoing with range, but I foresee a lot of weird little issues with Revolution, specifically being one of your best abilities is now Piercing Shot, and it only has a 3-second cooldown, so anything after Piercing Shot is like never gonna get cast really, which is a bit unfortunate, you know what I mean? Additionally, there's also a lot of special attacks and EOF special attacks which you can't cast with Revolution. So if you're relying on those things, they can't be, you have to manually cast them, and you're not going to be able to revo them either. So yeah, definitely if you're a revo type player, stay away from range if you ask me. Some of the other conclusions are it costs about 10 bill to buy best in slot range gear, which is pretty expensive. But I guess if you're really good at PVMing, you probably could make that amount of money. It's definitely realistic, especially with how good Raziel is for making money and how easy that boss is. You can just sit there and farm and farm and farm and make a ton of money there, and then buy your range gear. And the final, I guess, overall conclusion is I would say range with absolute best in slot gear is probably only about a B in the combat. It's a B, I guess like a 7 out of 10. I guess that would technically be a C. So I guess it's an 8 out of 10. It's good, but it's not really good enough in my opinion for the amount of effort and the amount of money you have to put into it. At least compared to Necromancy, which is about 1/100th of the effort and about 1/10th of the cost. So yeah, I would say it's a B, you know what I mean? It's not super great. Most people probably aren't gonna like using range, to be honest with you, but if you're a super sweat, definitely pick it up. So hopefully you guys enjoy this type of video, just kind of me going over range. If you like this type of video and you made it this far, definitely drop a like on it. It does help promote the channel quite a bit. And if you like these types of videos where I'm kind of explaining and talking about the different combat styles now that the combat update has happened, drop a comment about it and kind of give me your opinions and if you like this type of video. And as always, guys, thanks for watching. I will see you in the next one.